Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rebecca and on this channel I'll go through all things accounting, finance, Excel and investment related. So if you do like this kind of content then please do consider subscribing, and otherwise we're going to jump straight into the video. So in today's video I'm going to give you a little bit more insight into the process of auditing. So if you're currently studying auditing within the AAT, or if you're new to audit, or if you've been audited by an external firm and you're just wanting to know a little bit more information about what the process is of auditing, then you're in the right place. So if you wanted to, you could break down an audit into possibly 9 different areas. So if you think of audit as a circle here, then you've got point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the top. So 9 should be where the auditor is reappointed in that annual general meeting. And you might see that referred to sometimes in your notes in the AAT or also in work as the AGM. So if you find a document called AGM notes, it's just the notes taken from the meeting at the annual general meeting. So the board of directors have to reappoint auditors, or they will appoint a new set of auditors in that meeting. But the very first point of contact with an audit engagement and a client will be what we call the engagement letter. So if you're working in audit, then you might have seen on various different clients' files, whether they be paper or electronic, possibly more electronic than they are paper these days. But when I was doing auditing, we had these big paper files, and basically at the start of the file, what you'd have is an engagement letter. And in that engagement letter, it was basically a letter to the client that lists out your duties and responsibilities as the auditor. So this would be sent out to the client. They would review that, and if they're happy, then they would sign the engagement letter. You'd keep a signed copy on your client's file, and this is the first step of that audit process. So if you're not familiar with what an engagement letter looks like, then it might be worth having a look at the client's files that you're working on right now, or maybe asking to see what an engagement letter looks like if you're working in practice. Alternatively, if you're working in industry, then you can ask your boss for a copy of the engagement letter, or just to view it for your own understanding, as both the client and the auditor should have a signed copy of that form. Now, the second part of the audit process is planning. So what the auditors will do is they will have a look at some initial figures, so maybe some draft figures from the client, and they'll have a look at various areas of risk. So say they'll look at assets, and if there's been a lot of additions in the year, for example, compared to last year, then they might want to focus a little bit more on that area. Or there might be risk to the business because of the industry that the client works in, for example. But this planning should detail the type of audit work that's going to be undertaken, so the likes of sample testing, the size of those sample tests, how much evidence they're going to go into with various areas of the financial statements, so whether that be a little bit more focus on sales this year or a little bit more focus on purchases, liabilities, that sort of thing. The testing of controls, so who does what in the business, what type of qualification those individuals have, is there any segregation of duty, the time frame of those tasks, as well as completion testing, so analytical reviews, that sort of thing. So they'll make some initial plans, and basically that work, so the plan in general, will then be reviewed by a partner within that firm of accountants. So they will agree to that planning, and as part of the planning process, this is where that individual manager on the audit will decide what staff they're going to take along to that audit, how long they need them for, the dates of the final completion meeting, the dates on site, how long the audit is going to last, etc. So once the partner is happy with all of that, then they will sign off that element of the planning process. The next part of this process will then be ascertaining the client's controls and systems. So as part of looking at those controls that we mentioned earlier, what they will do is possibly, at this point, a sales walkthrough test, a purchase walkthrough test, and other similar tests, just to gain an understanding of the system. They might even go out on site to visit the client and ask questions about the system currently in use, if there's been any changes from last year to this year, if there's been any changes in roles and responsibilities. So again, if an individual was doing a task last year, are they still doing that task? Is there somebody else who's replaced them? Who do they need to speak to about certain elements of the financial statements? And when they're asking these questions, it just makes it easier for when they're then on site, because they've got a list of individuals that they can go to ask any relevant questions that they might have about certain areas of the financial statements. So you could say that that testing of that system is also the next step within this process. So really 3 and 4 go together. So the ascertaining of controls and then the testing of controls. So at this point, if the auditors found that those systems or controls are weak, then it might lead to higher testing later on, so more detailed testing than what they had initially planned. So this point 4 is extremely important as part of the overall auditing process. So let's move on to number 5. So number 5, you might see in your test as verifying assets and liabilities. But what the auditor is going to be doing at this point is they're going to be on site potentially, or they might be doing this remotely, where they're testing various areas of the financial statements, verifying assets on site, so making sure that those assets exist, for example, obtaining written evidence from the likes of customers to obtain evidence that what is actually shown as an age debt at the year end is accurate. They might also obtain the likes of bank loan documentation to support if there are any bank loans, for example. So this is the part basically where they're just going to be undertaking their testing of the financial statements. Now this falls nicely into the next point, which is point 6, where the auditors are then going to review the financial statements for the likes of comparability, if they are reliable, they are timely, etc. So those controls that you learned about early on in your AAT studies regarding financial statements, this is the type of testing work that they're going to be doing at this point. So once they're happy with the test that they've already undertaken, they'll then take almost a summary view of the financial statements and say, are these sensible and are they consistent with what they already know about the financial statements and what's happened in the business within that period that they're auditing. So the next point, so you could call this point 7, is where the auditor is then going to obtain written confirmation from the client regarding the truth and fairness of the financial statements. So if you look in a set of financial statements, what you'll find is an auditor's report, and you'll also find a director's report. So in that director's report, the director will sign to say that they agree that the financial statements have been prepared in accordance with the Companies Act 2006 and whether those financial statements are true and fair. Point 8 is then the auditors signing the auditor's report. So you'll find that again, usually directly after the director's report and a set of financial statements. So if you're working in practice, then it's worth having a read through the set of financial statements that are prepared once the audit is complete on the client that you've been working on, just for your own understanding. So just have a look at the director's report and the auditor's report, have a little read through there and see what the overall outcome of the audit was on that client's set of accounts. And then that brings us back round to point 9, which again was the reappointment of the auditors at the annual general meeting or the AGM, or the appointment of a new set of auditors at the AGM. So, as always, I hope you found the video useful. Do give it a thumbs up if you did. Consider subscribing as always, and I shall see you on the next video.